All right, so yep, finally back home. And yes, I know there were audio problems for the two videos on my phone. I don't use my phone for videos that often. I really don't. So you'll have to excuse me that I'm trying. I was trying my best. I wanted to get those videos out because I had some thoughts about it, and I wanted to give my thoughts about the videos about the story, the two subjects in question, which we are getting more information about because Comic-Con is drawing nearer and nearer. So yeah, just stay. We got to just stay tuned and then see what happens next, especially with the Punisher thing. But yeah, so yep, back home, and yeah, let's talk about this other subject that I didn't get to talk about. I didn't really have a chance to really give my thoughts on, mostly because I wasn't home and I just didn't want to fight with my phone over audio issues again. So I decided, and also, more importantly, I kind of forgot. About this subject too. And what exactly is this subject we're going to be talking about this time around? We're going to be talking about the announcement of Universal Monster Comics. That's right. Skybound, which is now the new home for both Transformers and G.I. Joe, is getting a Universal Monster line. Universal Monsters is officially getting a comic line over at Skybound with Image Comics. So Skybound is really cranking out a lot of big books. They are now doing licensed IPs, and they're getting good people behind this. This is what I really like, is that it's not like Joe Schmo or whoever just doing the comic. What I really love about this is that it is actually known and major writers taking over these comics. So yeah. So our first one is basically the first Universal monster, the monster that started it all, and it's a comic miniseries of Dracula. So Dracula is getting that's going to be apparently the first of the miniseries, and I imagine if this sells well, they'll put out the rest. But yes, so this is going to be first. Let's talk about the comic itself. Let's really dive into what the comic story itself is about. This story about Dracula will focus on Dracula as the sequel. This will not regard, at least I don't think it will regard, Dracula's Daughter or the film of Son of Dracula. I don't think it will regard any of those movies, and instead it's going to be a direct sequel to. It's kind of like a requel. It's kind of like a requel, like Renfield was meant to be. Yeah, for those who don't know, Renfield was apparently meant to be a requel to the original Todd Browning film. But I digress. So this story will focus on Dr. Seward, who is now the head of the asylum that he was running, and will now be... everyone's dealing with the scars left behind with Dracula. And this is going to be a very psychological horror comic involving Dracula and his coming resurrection. So I really do like the idea that we're dealing... I'm always a fan of, dealing with, you don't just get to walk away from... the horrors you just encountered. I love when horror films do that, and there are some that do it really well, and other ones that don't. Looking at you, Halloween Ends. But this sounds really cool, and the writer they tapped for it is actually someone I think is a perfect writer. That being, the person being for this specific comic is none other than James Tynion IV. James Tynion, most of you guys would know best as a big writer for Batman. He also wrote the acclaimed Batman Ninja Turtle crossovers, and he also has done a lot of horror comics for DC, like DC vs. Vampires. He also was responsible for a lot of the Black Label books under Hill House, which was Nice House at the Lake, and a few other horror comics here and there. So the dude does know his horror, and he has dabbled he's obviously done a lot of vampire stuff, so I think he is the right guy I think James Tynion is the right guy, even though I do think Tynion in main comic book stuff is very hit and miss. I do think he is a very hit and miss writer, but if you were to give him a good... from what I've read of his horror stuff is actually really good. So to really make Dracula a psychological horror is a really good idea. I really do love that fact that they're really not making it like an action horror. They're making it like a full-on, like, we're gonna make this a straight-up gore fest of a comic, and we're just gonna go all fucking out for it. So, with Dracula being the first, it would stand to reason that it's free real estate for all the other vampire. It's free real estate for all the other the Universal monsters. Excuse me. It's really free real estate for all the other Universal monsters, and there are just so many to really like talk about, like what you could do with the other Universal monsters. Obviously, I think the next one, if Dracula does well, they'll kind of go down the line and do the next big one, which is Frankenstein. So, Frankenstein, I personally would like to see, if they get another writer, I would kind of want to see Daniel Warren Johnson, who's going to be writing Transformers. I would love to see Daniel Warren Johnson do the artwork as well as write this Frankenstein book. I think he could do a kind of a fun, gore-fest action story. As for other writers, I would love to see, if they can get Donny Cates, if Image can get Donny Cates to do it, I kind of want to see Donny Cates do an Invisible Man comic. Why Invisible Man? Well, it's not just because Invisible Man is my favorite of the Universal monsters. I just think Donny Cates could really play with just kind of the utter insanity that Jack Griffin goes through. Depending on if they make it a sequel, because Jack Griffin's dead, maybe they could do like a resurrection thing, or like a prequel story, who knows. So yeah. Actually, now that I think about it, Daniel Warren Johnson, I wouldn't mind him doing Frankenstein, but now that I think about it, I think I'd love to see his Mummy. Actually, no. Daniel Warren Johnson for Frankenstein, and James Stokoe for the Mummy. Yeah, James Stokoe for the Mummy. Most of you guys would know James Stokoe best as the critically acclaimed writer of Aliens Dead Orbit, but more importantly, that dude was behind Godzilla the Half-Century War, arguably one of the best, if not the best, Godzilla comics written, or Godzilla pieces of media ever. So, and he does a phenomenal job, especially when it comes to drawing Egyptian architecture, as well as making gods look interesting. So I would have James Stokoe do the Mummy. As for female writers, I would love to see Karina Becco, who most of you guys would know best for the Vampirella Aliens book, but she also is big on aliens. I would love to see her write The Creature from the Black Lagoon. I know what you're thinking. I thought, shouldn't she be writing, the Bride of Frankenstein? No. That's, no. She's really good at writing monster stories. So Karina Becco, I would definitely have write I would absolutely have her do Creature from the Black Lagoon. As for who could do Bride of Frankenstein, I think my pick for who I would have for the Bride of Frankenstein, man, that's a tough one. I'm quite unsure about that. If they could get Joe Hill, I'd like to see what he could do with that if he's not doing his own stuff. Scott Snyder, I would love to see do a book too. I would love to see Scott Snyder do a Universal Monster book. Maybe. Actually, the Wolfman maybe, but we all know he's good at bats. So maybe if they do another Dracula book, they could do that. But yeah, there's just so much potential with all of this, and I'm just happy that this is just more showing that Universal's pushing more of the Universal monsters. So yeah, so you guys tell me in the comments below, what do you guys think of the announcement, the official announcement of these Universal Monster comics, and what writers would you love to see do comics for each Universal monster? Just comment below, let me know, and once again, hope you all enjoyed this. I'm Mr. Multiverse. I'll see you next time in the Multiverse.